There we go. Welcome everyone to our Integrity Team meeting of February 2024. I'm Hildy Gottlieb with Creating the Future, and it is awesome to have you all here. If you are watching and would like to participate just via tweeting as you're thinking about things, please tweet to the hashtag Creating the Future. We won't be looking anywhere else. So if you've got stuff that you want to tweet out, if you're sitting in the meeting here and want to tweet, or if you are watching via the website and tweeting your responses, please again use the hashtag Creating the Future. I will try and remember to remind folks of the hashtag while we're meeting, but there's a good chance I'll forget. It is really, really wonderful to have everybody here. I see Justin is joining us. And so let's just start with a deep breath and what is going on in everyone's lives. We have not been together as a group for many months. It was a real gift last year to take slow time to think. There was so much to think about, and to pull together a plan for what's going to be the 3 years and we wrap up our mission. So, but it's going to be awesome this year to get back into meeting every month and getting stuff done on that plan. So looking really, really forward to it. Who would like to start out? Please just tell us who you are, where you are, whose lands you are sitting on. And if you know something about the people, that would be awesome, because it's always about the people. And something that's meaningful in your life. What's meaningful going on in your life these days? So who you are, where you are, and what's bringing you joy these days, or just meaningful. Who would like to start?
Okay, I'll do it. Unless somebody else has burning. Carl, you're already unmuted. Hi, everyone. I'm Angie Eikenberry. I'm in Omaha, Nebraska, and on the traditional tribal land of the Omaha, as well as the Odo, Missouri, the Ponca Sioux, and the Winnebago. And still those tribes and many others very much present in this area. And including in our School of Public Administration, we have a tribal and emergency management governance program. So I get the great opportunity to work with my colleagues in that program and learn a lot from them. And that's actually what's been also meaningful in my life lately. I'm taking over as director of our school, and so been really heavily involved the last few weeks, months, in starting to plan things more actively, especially around our enrollment growth and resource development and hiring areas, which I think overlap with some of the things we'll be talking about today. So excited to be back and seeing all of you, or meeting some of you for the first time as well. And should I popcorn it, or?
Oh, that would be fun. And
yeah.
and I just to give you all, I'm already out of sync. So
Oh.
we have we have gotten about a minute into the meeting and my video's already out of sync. So sorry about that, gang. Yeah, let's popcorn it. That sounds good. For newcomers, I will introduce newcomers. So if you want to go to somebody you know, Angie, that'd be awesome.
Okay, then I'm going to popcorn it to Carl.
Thanks, Angie. Hi, everyone. I'm Carl Wilding. I am out in the UK, about 20 miles north of London. So it is currently just after 6 p.m. in the evening here. So if you see me stifle yawns every now and then, I must apologize in advance. Weather here, it seems to have never stopped raining for the last few weeks. It's been very cold, but getting better. Awesome. Well, actually, it's awesome to be sort of back here. It's a good crowd, and we always have good conversations. And yeah, well, you know, I mean, it's part of life coming here, so that's good. Otherwise, sort of work-wise, I'm sort of like spinning what feels like about 6 different plates at the minute, and I keep dropping some of them because I'm not very good at spinning plates. I spend a bit of my time in, like Angie, sort of in the university world, though. Angie, my thing that might be about awesome is that I might have just got someone through to get a PhD funded, and I might be about to supervise someone doing a PhD, which is going to be a very, very new experience for me. Yeah, life is good. I am going to go to Cara.
Oh, I would love to introduce Kara. Kara and I had the pleasure. I'm hoping you had the pleasure, but I had the pleasure of working with Kara for a year or so via our local food bank. And Kara's now doing consulting work, but if there is somebody that I absolutely just love being with, it is Kara. She is wise and funny, and it is just a joy to have you here. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the invite. Yeah, my name is Kara. I'm in Tucson, Arizona, on the lands of the Tohono O'odham, Pasquayaqui, and Hohokam peoples, who all played a large role in continuous agriculture in this area for thousands of years, and that we still rely on a lot of today, and I think about in our own backyard gardening. And I have work stuff, but I don't know, after like a year of kind of shifting jobs and shifting priorities a little bit, I joined a meditation group that's following a book called A Year to Live, which is kind of like thinking of this year as your last year, and like as a practice of that lens. And so what do you want to feel? What do you want to be part of? Who do you want to be from that angle? And so that is just really shifting up my thinking, even in small ways of like, dealing with a difficult employee or something. It's like, well, if I'm dying on January 25th of 2025, because that was the date our group set, how would I handle this? And so that's been, just a meaningful practice to shift maybe some habitual thoughts or ways of doing things.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
I will popcorn it to Mark.
Hi, thanks. I'm on the the unceded lands of the Korchog, the Shinnecock, which were part, I think, of the Iroquois Nation, and the Haudenosaunee further up, but more research is needed, certainly. We're in a farming community on the east end of Long Island, New York, and pushing to save our farmlands, but at the same time, arguing over whether they should be using pesticides to kill off all the pollinators. So we've got a constant battle going on all the time. And my calling now is to make sure that these groups get together. So we're working together, not just I think we've got a lot of the same values, but once you start talking about the how, everything degenerates very quickly. So that's what I'm facing. Being given the opportunity this week to talk to our county executive about waste management, which sounds kind of boring on Valentine's Day, but we're in crisis, in a lot of crises right now. So I know I appreciate seeing certainly Dimitri and Hildy, but Angie and Justin and Carl, we've worked on these things for a long time, and I'm glad to be here. That's my awesome today. Thank you.
Who would you like to pop over to, Mark?
Yeah, I was eating the popcorn. Shantine.
And I would love to introduce Shantine. I have known Shantine for many, many years. She is brilliant and funny, and also happens to be a recovering attorney in employment law, and has sat on both sides of the fence. She has worked for employers, and most recently, before moving away from the law, has been working with employees against employers. So there's nobody I'd rather have in this conversation than you. So it's really good to have you here.
Thank you so much, Hildy. And I am so honored to be here for my first meeting and seeing all your faces, some of you whom I've spoken with on the phone before. So it's just really wonderful. I am in San Jose, California, in Silicon Valley, and the ancestral lands here from the Ohlone and Muwekma Ohlone tribes. And although I think we as a community have a lot more work to do in helping them with their current missions, there's a lot of effort by our universities like Santa Clara University to help with land rematriation and also federal recognition. So very honored and blessed to be here as well on this beautiful land. And again, to be here. As Hildy mentioned, I am a recovering attorney. I still have my license and I still have my law firm, but I have served for several years in federal government, national security, and then I transitioned to employment law, working for employees. And my clientele consisted of largely underserved community members. So those from the LGBTQIA groups and as well as women, other, like I said, underserved communities. And that's really been my focus. But I have been wanting to and have been in the process of transitioning to more nonprofit efforts on my end for my community. And so to have an opportunity like this to bring whatever expertise and knowledge I can of both employment law, but also just employment relations, employer relations, which are always very divisive and difficult, no matter if you have the best employer in the world or the worst. I am just very honored to be here, and I hope that I can add some value to this really esteemed group. So thank you so much for being here and letting me be here. I appreciate it.
Well, it'll be awesome to have you as part of the conversation.
Thank you. I will popcorn over to Justin. See him down there.
Great, thank you, Shantine. I'm Justin Pollock. I am in Washington, D.C., which is the land upon which the Nacotchtank and Piscataway tribes thrived. And I was born and raised in Oakland, California, Shantine. So there's a little pang in my heart because for those who were interested yesterday, my hometown 49er team lost to some Midwestern team in the Super Bowl.
The screams were heard around the country.
So what's going on here? I am actually just now coming out of recovery from pneumonia and was able to actually go out and do a run. So I compete in triathlons, not the really big crazy ones, but the smaller ones. So me being able to exercise is a tremendous release, particularly given the trauma and horror that is going on in the world right now. Not having that was incredibly hard. So my awesome is that I have a release. The not so awesome is that I need so much to release from. That often feels out of our control. But that's where I am. So, and I will hand off over to Dimitri.
I will.
Hello, everyone. Dimitri Petropoulos coming to you also from Tucson, Arizona, home of the Tohono O'odham, the Pasquayaki, and then Hohokam further back. I think it was Kara who mentioned that. I am sort of excited to be here with you guys. It seems like it's been a really long time, and so that has been sort of an amazing thing to think about. There's several things that I have been pondering over. One, we have all the mountains covered with snow around here. So we're in the southern Arizona desert, and you go outside and you look literally in 3 out of the 4 directions, and the mountain peaks have got snow. So it feels like we're somewhere in northern Colorado instead of southern Arizona, which is pretty amazing. There's 2 things that have come up that have made me sort of reflective, and Kara, the thing you were talking about really emphasized this to me. 2 events happened in this last week. One was a memorial service for a high school friend, someone who whose brother was my best friend all throughout high school. So I kind of knew Dave. Dave was a couple years ahead, and the service was a remembrance with everyone just telling stories about Dave, who was a pretty amazing person. He was a physician and also my physician for a long time. So knew him professionally, knew him as a friend, and some of the stories that came out of that were really not whimsical, but you kind of got the character of him loving to play little practical jokes on people and having a sly sense of humor. The other end of that is this last week was our new little granddaughter's 3rd birthday. And so just been reflective on the fact that, these are opposite ends of the spectrum. And looking at her joy, and I'm going to share a quick picture, and sorry if I'm, oops, I want to do that, and share. And that's Athena, and those are some of her birthday presents, which is an apron that says, I think Athena Chef or whatever, but she has a little cutting board that also says Athena Chef. So she was just wonderfully happy, and we're sorry we couldn't be there. I wish I could have been there, but the joy that she was expressing really made me bookend this week in the, just sort of thinking about it and talking about it. So that was my awesome, is the fact that there is a continuum here, and I'm glad to be thinking about it in that context. Oh, yeah. And I'm gonna pop over to Rihanna.
And I would love to introduce Rihanna, because I also have gotten to work with Rihanna over the past year or two, maybe. It really, I am very, very, very blessed that I get to work with people that I love working with. It is just so joyful. And Rihanna and I have worked very, very closely on a bunch of webinars where it wasn't only planning the webinars, but we actually got to be together and be with folks and be in deep conversation and facilitate together. And just, yeah, it's another person that it is just a joy to be with. So tell us what's going on, where you are, and what's going on in your world that's meaningful, Rihanna.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Sorry, I'm having microphone issues. So yeah, my name is Rihanna. I'm in Canada. So I live in Edmonton, which is also known as the Misquitchie Waskaikan, which means Beaver Hills House in Cree. And we're on Treaty 6 territory and Métis Region 4. And I actually just came from a collaboration meeting talking about food security. So that's kind of what I've been thinking about this morning. We're also facing a lot of crises here in Edmonton with the rising food costs in Canada. Food insecurity has become a major challenge. Housing is also a huge challenge, and where I live is one of the most affordable major cities in the country, but we have 4,000 or 5,000 unhoused people right now, and tons of empty buildings. So there's a lot of this mismatch that's happening because of capitalism and the after impacts of COVID. So the work that we've been able to do with Hildy has been really helping us think differently about how we can move forward in a good way. And someone, I can't remember who it was, someone mentioned that it's been really cold for them. So a few weeks ago, we got down to record colds here for over 60 years. It was minus 45 degrees Celsius. My car actually froze and I couldn't get it started. We couldn't boost it. There was no hope until it warmed up. So it's much warmer now, thankfully, but I always laugh when people say that it's really cold, because it's all maybe a bit of a subjective measure. So thanks for having me here today.
It's a wonderful, wonderful to have you here. Yeah, here in the desert, we complain when it is when it's freezing, when it's 0 Celsius, and then I hear from you guys, and I'm like, oh man, we've got nothing. We've got nothing. I too am located in the traditional homelands of the Tohono O'odham and the Pasquayaki and the Hohokam before them. And we had the joy this weekend. It's been storming here just as the storms have been in California. They always come from the west over to here. And so we've had storms, which is why the mountains are covered in snow. And I had the joy this past weekend, as the storms were clearing, we drove out to the reservation because the land is just so beautiful. And just wanted to see the snow on the mountains and the clouds disappearing, and just remembering that they're not our lands. The reservation of the Tohono O'odham, I believe, is the second largest in the country. It is vast and beautiful, and split by the U.S. border. So the fact that there are folks who traverse across back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, because that's their land. There's no line in their land. That's their homeland. The threat, the thought of border walls is not just against wildlife, and it is because that's so much of what we think about here in the desert, is that it's preventing wildlife from getting across. Well, it's also preventing people who were here a long time before we were from getting back and forth. So always, as Justin, as you said, there's always way too much to be thinking about. I guess one of the things that you made me think about, Justin, pardon me, is that I'm celebrating. I have been dealing with plantar fasciitis for the past 4 or 5 months, and I was afraid to walk. And very much like you're talking about, Justin, that it is the thing that makes life okay when life is not okay. I haven't been able to. I was afraid to do the kind of walking that I do, which is generally about 3 to 5 miles a day. And I had the joy of going to a podiatrist who basically said, you can't hurt it if you walk. And so that's all I needed to hear. And so part of my joy is I've been walking again. So that alone is really been, any of you who exercise just to get your brain in gear, you know that just has been really, really wonderful. So also really meaningful in my life is that this is such a transition year. This is the year that we are stepping into what does it mean to accomplish our mission to the very, very best that we can in the next 3 years. And so there is a lot to do. A lot of what we're going to be talking about today, there's a lot to do, and all of it's going really, really well. As we talked about the last time we were together, there is a huge effort that needs to be funded. And part of funding is just talking to lots and lots and lots of people. And so I have been on a 2-week on, 2-week off schedule, 2 weeks of meetings, 2 weeks of no meetings, which is the only way anything's getting done during the 2 weeks of meetings. Nothing's getting done except these fabulous conversations. And I have to say, I am talking to some of the most interesting humans, committed humans, and it is just delightful. My approach to fundraising has always been just talk to a whole lot of people, and they'll lead you to a whole lot more people, and eventually we'll get funded. And so I have just had the absolute honor of talking sometimes 4 and 5 and 6 Zoom meetings a day, which is a lot, a little bit tiring. At the end of the day, I'm actually collapsing. But every meeting, and probably the reason I'm collapsing is every meeting is exhilarating. Every meeting is mind stretching. And so it's really, really been joyful. I will ask all of you, if you know folks who are really thinking about systems change through a different lens, it doesn't matter. I'm not just talking to funders. I'm really talking to anyone who is in that arena and knows folks who are really focusing on deep systems change. Bring them, because it's that's what's going to lead us where we need to be. So it's been joyful and tiring. I keep saying it's exhilarating and exhausting all at the same time. But that's really what's been meaningful in my life, is just having these incredible conversations that are leading to other conversations that are leading to other conversations that I know eventually that's how we'll fund what we need. So let's get started on diving into creating what's next for creating the future. And again, I apologize if anyone is watching. Oh, first of all, if you are watching and want to share where you are and what's meaningful in your life, please do so. Anything that we ask in this meeting, we want you to participate. So please do. The first thing we're going to be diving into as we talk about what's next is going to be hiring. That's the reason that we're raising money. This is a short-term project. Like I said, there's 3 years left of our mission. And we're going to be hiring/contracting for folks to do everything to document our mission and get it out there. So document what we've learned, whether that is in writing, whether that is in writing for our blog, for Fast Company, or for academic journals, whether that is video production for classes, whether that is podcast production for audio, whatever it takes to build out a library of everything that we've learned about the power of catalytic thinking, including the pedagogy of what we've learned works to teach this. So it's going to take all of those people to create that, and people to publicize, and people to do community engagement. And so there's going to be a lot of hiring, either hiring and or contracting. And in my mind, those are all the same. The mechanism is different, but it's people and it's working together. And so we're just going to walk through the catalytic thinking questions. If you need a refresher in the website, there is a link to all of those questions, but we'll just be walking through them. And we will figure out our hiring practices, something that aligns with our values, something that aligns with catalytic thinking, which ensures that it aligns with our values. So let's start with the first question. When it comes to hiring practices at creating the future, who will be affected by those hiring practices? Whose lives will be touched by the processes and practices that we put in place?
Can I start?
Please do.
Well, from experience, and with so many nonprofit consultants in the room here, I think you know what I'm going to say now, and that is, when you move from being a group where the input of people who aren't paid is, so fundamental to the organization, and then you start employing people, then the dynamic will shift. And even for Hildy and Dimitri, the dynamic will shift. And I guess what I'm sort of trying to say here is that bringing in paid people, it will have an impact upon us. It solves one set of problems in terms of helping us to move on, but then it might create a different set of problems that need to be dealt with. It will create some different dynamics, certainly for us as board members. So if that's the still right expression, my apologies. Yeah. So it's gonna have an impact upon us in terms of the dynamic.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So those of us who are already here, obviously any new people coming in. So I'll state the obvious one. New employees/contractors and prospective employees/contractors. So I'll do the easy one. But Carl, you're mentioning all of us who are already here. Yeah. Who else?
Well, Hildy, you expanded it to include the prospective, or those who apply and or propose. But But I would also say we are likely to rely on a network of people to do sort of the recruitment, or, you know, whatever we want to call that, getting the word out, or the invitation. So the folks who are involved in that process.
Yep. Who else? Whose lives will be touched by what we are doing here?
So if I may, Hildy, one thing to think about is, I mean, it obviously draws from what's been said before, but whenever we have agents working on our behalf, whether those are contractors or employees, their actions are going to be both inferred back to the organization itself, and also they're going to have particular authority to do things on behalf of the organization. And so it really starts to branch out and expand the realm of the control that we have, or that you all have, as directors, in terms of making sure that you're directing those actions, but also having to take some of the reins away from yourself and let them go out in the world and do what they're going to do. So it's going to impact the organization, but it's also going to be very outward facing, in the sense that the agents are going to make decisions and do things on behalf of the organization that are going to be perceived by the outside world. And there's not always a lot of control we can exert over both what they're doing and then how that's perceived on the other end.
Yeah, very, very, very much so. And one thing to clarify that I think really reinforces what you're saying, Shantine, is that this board is not a decision-making board. It's been, I don't know, several years now that the board realized that the people closest to the decision are the ones to make the decision. And that this board, which is why we prefer to call ourselves an integrity body, is really about making sure that decisions that are made with integrity to our values and our vision. And so it is even more important. What you're talking about is the fact that folks are going to be out in the world and creating additional ripples. Whose lives will they touch? Which is really, really important. Yeah. And I really do apologize that my video is so out of sync. It's making me crazy. So I'm really sorry about that, guys.
Are you using which mic are you using?
I don't know. I'll check my mic. But yeah, thank you. Anybody else? Who else? Whose lives will be touched by what, as you're talking, Shantine, about pretty much everybody out in the world, it's going to be anybody. There's so many layers to that. Let's talk about that. Who are in those layers? Who are you all seeing in those layers of who will be touched by the folks who are working here?
I think that one layer is thinking about the people that are using catalytic thinking and using the resources of creating the future already, and then the people, the next layer and the next layer from there.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, even just thinking about that, there's individuals using the framework, but there's also, like Angie, you're teaching it in your class. We've got other university professors that are teaching it in their classes. So it's individuals who are using it, and folks who are sharing it, whether that's consultants who are taking it out into the world. Justin, you're always taking it out into the world. Yeah. Who else? Whose lives will be touched by what we're about to do? By the folks who we hire, or by our hiring practices?
Well, if we're going out talking to funders, Hildy, this is another area where the introduction of paid staff potentially changes the dynamic, it seems to me. And there'll be some funders who might be a little queasy about the fact that we are shifting to employing people, because they might value the relationship that they have with you, and they might perceive those paid staff to be sort of intermediaries that gets in the way of the direct relationship that they might want with you. conversely, it's not just a question of who, it's also a question of, I guess, how many. So you mean after being negative a couple of times about the problems having paid staff might create, the introduction of paid staff potentially enables us to significantly expand our reach and our depth. So in that sense, we are potentially having an impact on more people.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. That's the goal. Yeah.
And I don't mean to hog the mic at all, but one other thing I was thinking about and who this will reach is whenever we're hiring as employers or as a board or whomever is making that decision, the practices that we implement, which includes wages, which includes the openness and transparency of wages, which includes benefits, which includes whatever else could be on offer, has an impact in our community in the extent that we can set standards, and we may not be aligned with current standards. And that's something to be mindful of because sometimes that's wonderful. And you can really push the envelope and say, we're going to hire at this level, and this is what we're going to offer. And we stand apart from other employers of our kind or any kind. And that's going to draw a lot of attention, but it also can draw attention in the other way, where you might have other people in the same space who don't necessarily see the hiring practices in the same way, or feel that there's a competitiveness to the way that you're pricing, your wages and salaries. So it comes back to this idea that we can be standard setters and we can be bold and we can offer things that others do not do as as a group that I think really values that kind of treatment of their employees, keeping our standards high. But it's also just something to be mindful of, that there might be pushback from community members or from others who see that as being too bold or maybe not bold enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. That brings up like 9 million thoughts for me. And what does that bring up for you all? So often we are told, and we have been, for those who may not know, and especially those who may be watching and haven't been closely aligned with what we've been doing, back in, it was a year ago or so, we did a massive community engagement effort around what's next for our mission. And one of the really interesting comments that was very heartening for those of us that have been doing this work for a long time, that have been talking together for a really long time, is the thought that we are, I think somebody said something to the effect of, we're willing to go out on a limb, and that leaves them feeling safer to go out on their own limb. And that's you really raised that for me, Shantine, as you were talking. We're asking different questions, and what we're going to come up with is, at a minimum for us, legal is always minimum. Legal is always okay. Yeah, let's assume it's going to be legal. Let's make sure that it's going to be. Now let's do the good stuff. And there are people who are watching to learn from that. We have had probably a bigger response to the invitation to our community to join this meeting by watching, by being inside the meeting. We have probably had a bigger response to this meeting than we've had to any in, I was going to say a year, but we haven't really been meeting for a year. But really a huge response. There is a lot of interest in this topic. And so I think if somebody is really looking to say, what does it look like to align with your values as you're looking at a hiring process, I think you're right. There's the people who are watching. Yeah. Anyone else pop to mind that is that will be affected by the hiring practices and processes that we put into place? Go ahead, Dimitri. I'll mute.
Thinking of potential partners, Shantine, you made me think about people who, would be see us potentially as competitors as one possible thing for hiring, but also there is the people who would be potential partners. Who are we teaming with, and how are they going to see this? Hopefully for the good in the future.
Can you guys hear me? Yes? Okay. I tried a different mic, Dimitri.
You tried one in the camera?
No, that's what I was on. So, so now I'm still, yeah.
Troubleshooting.
Yeah, I'm thinking we just throw the laptop off the balcony and be done with it. That would be a whole lot more fun. That would at least be momentary joy on my part. Okay, so what we're talking about is the folks who are already here inside of the work that we're doing, whether that is as board members, as volunteers, as team members, as folks who are involved in, let's say, our classes or our community of practice. So anyone who's already that changing the dynamics, potentially changing the dynamics within the group that already exists. Obviously, employees and prospective employees, contractors and prospective contractors, the whole network of people who will connect us to others, the folks in our community, everybody in the outside world who will be touched by the folks who are touched, whose lives are touched, people who are using the resources already, whether that is folks who are using it individually in their own lives, folks who are using it in their own work, folks who are teaching it to others, funders, potential partners, community members who are just, I shouldn't say just, who are watching and absorbing to think about new ways of being. And the fact that, as Carl noted, the more we're out there doing this, the more people that will mean. So the greater number of numbers that will mean. As we go along, we'll probably think of other folks, and we'll add that to the list. The second question in catalytic thinking is about listening for what is possible, listening for what is already working, and listening for what is important to folks. And I really think let's talk about what is important about this topic. And I think that's probably what we'll spend the rest of our time today focused on. Why is it important that we have this conversation? What's going on? What have you experienced? What is important about this? Go, Carl. Yeah.
So I'll get the conversation going by being provocative and saying, I think this is probably the single most difficult decision that most small organizations make, is first of all, whether or not to employ someone for the first time, and then the challenge of employing someone for the first time. And when I sort of think about some of the problems that I used to have to deal with in my old job, one of the biggest sources of things going wrong, probably after governance, was employing people and organizations messing up, to be very blunt. And then the converse of that is being so risk averse in terms of not quite understanding what they could or couldn't do, that they sort of end up not taking opportunities to be more inclusive, for example. So for those watching, you won't know, we just posted something in our chat about advertising salaries. If there's one thing I remember sort of having huge arguments with people about, it's whether or not you could publish salaries for roles. Some people thought that you should never ever do it, and other people thought that you absolutely must do it because you're stopping people from applying, and also you're contributing to other problems about wage differentials and so on between people of different gender and so on. So I think it's a really tough subject for people to get right. And I think even if we struggle ourselves in this, I think showing actually that there isn't a perfect way to hire people, but that we can sort of explore how to do these things, I think that's a good thing.
The only way that I know employment is through a capitalist system, as far as that my time or labor has a certain value that someone else puts on it and decides the rules of paying me for it and the rules of engagement. And so in a lot of ways, I feel like um, the catalytic thinking questions lead you maybe sometimes in a different direction than really standard dynamics of hierarchical power. And so I would say it feels important because it's almost like, how do you navigate these values within like a larger economic system that may not always hold those same values? And so that even just like the language used could be very different, which can be like very meaningful, or it could also be like very confusing. And what are we talking about? So I guess that's why I would say it feels important.
So I would, Carrie, you were starting to touch at one of the things that was really standing out for me, which is, it's in these internal practices where the values really come into play and into action. So if there's integrity to any set of stated values, like this is actually the spot where it's going to manifest, and we actually have full control over. I mean, and particularly in the realm of community benefit, where we externalize values onto those who are affected and served by us, that it's very easy to do, because I think, to Carol, what you were saying is it actually abstracts it from those capitalistic scarcity models, because there's a division between running a business and serving the folks. Whereas when we start to bring it in and think about who are we contracting, how are we contracting, how are we employ, all of those elements, that's where the culture, which is the sum total of the actual values and action, comes into play. And so that integrity piece, we have the opportunity to really look deeply and say, are we able to actually practice? And I think this whole idea of what does it look like to practice these values when they come in conflict with these societal system structures that push in the opposite direction of much of what we are professing. So I think that, part of, I think, Carl, why it's so difficult is because it always feels icky because the values are misaligned. I mean, that's, when we say, like, people, we don't want to reveal salaries because what if everybody knows what everybody else makes? It's like, your problem's not a salary problem. You have a different problem than, so yeah, so I think that us being in this space, and we have this opportunity to really see what it looks like to live the values in action, to sit and be present with the hypocrisies that exist, and how we navigate them, and the opportunity to create transparency around that so other people understand what it means to sit with the challenges that are there. Is, we have the opportunity to do that, and all of those who are affected, if nothing else, they come closer to experiencing the values and action that we profess. I'm not sure if I stayed on track there.
The track is for us to discuss what's important, and I don't know that you can get more important than where we're going here. Yeah. What else? What is important about this conversation? What sparks for you as Kara and Justin are talking about what they're talking about?
One of the things that sparks for me, Hildy, and I think everyone is hitting so many nails on the head, and it just makes my head explode with ideas about this topic because it is so near and dear to my legal practice and my nonprofit practice, is the idea of culture in an environment and an employment relationship. And I think a lot of times companies tend to pay just lip service to this idea of culture. And they'll say things like, well, we have an open, we have integrity, we have a culture of openness, culture of respect. It's one thing to say those things. It's another thing to, again, implement them into the practices that we have. That I think can start as early on as, first of all, this conversation and probably earlier, but the interview process itself, right? Because it's not just interviewing for someone to see if they're a match. They need to see if the organization is a match as well. And making sure that that's something that there's an understanding there that this needs to be a match on both ends, because otherwise the culture is just, again, just lip service. It doesn't really align with what's happening. And then, of course, then there's the day-to-day management. And I think the quickest way to see if there's a cultural mismatch, if you will, is to see how much time you're spending on employment-related issues versus the actual things that you need to get done every day, right? With the work that you need to do with the mission. And when those are unaligned, you will find that employers spend more of their time, probably all of their time, trying to manage the happiness, the well-being of their employees, the performance of their employees over achieving the mission. And so this, again, it goes back to how critical this discussion is, because ultimately what needs, in my perspective, what every company needs to do, every organization, whether it's nonprofit or corporation, whatever it happens to be, there needs to be a very firm understanding of what that culture wants to be, or what the goal is at the outset. And after there's this determination and there's an agreement on what that means, is to really keep that at heart as you move forward through the hiring process, and make sure that we're not discounting that just because somebody comes in with a great background, right? There's a lot of people out there with great backgrounds. It does not mean that they share the values of the organization. And those things will be discordant moving forward, because you can't ask necessarily to change someone's values in hiring, particularly if they see it purely as an employment relationship. That won't happen. So I think that is so important, is just being stalwart with what the culture is, what the goals are, and seeing, hey, yes, you have all of these great qualifications as a hire, but are you somebody who's going to stand with us and move with us in this integrity and in this space and in this culture? So just, bearing that in mind. But I think all these ideas are so brilliant. I'm just happy to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, well, welcome to Carl calls this his me time. Yeah, Dimitri, what you're really sparking for me, Shantine, is in the past 2 weeks, I have had 3 different conversations with 3 different people about 3 different organizations where they're talking about hiring and or have hired, and there is such a mismatch, because the whole hiring process is, well, when the new CEO comes in, we'll see what their vision is. And
Exactly.
rather than, this is the vision of the organization, will they fit with that vision? We're going to see where they take us with where their vision is. Dimitri and I years ago used to laugh at the number of organizations where every time a new president stepped onto the board, it was like, well, it's Tom's year. And so everything would go this way because now that's the way Tom wanted to go. And we watched several organizations where they literally negated everything Tom did because now it was Joe's turn. And so you just bounced back and forth. So I'm really, really glad of what you brought up, Shantine. Yeah, Dimitri.
Shantine, I had a question, or have a question about, because of your background, employment law with, I guess, the way the laws are structured around EEOC and all the other things, to now add the layer of values to this. So if someone walks in and I check all the other boxes, whatever those boxes happen to be, except not the values box, that's important to us, but it's not important societally. I mean, it's not important to most employers. So would someone come in and say, look, I'm the best videographer you've ever seen. I also happen to belong to the Nazi Party, but that's okay, because you're hiring my work skills, in terms of what I am. I just curious as to your comments on that, or your thoughts on
Where's the line? Right. Great question. So I'll speak at the federal level just because I'm a California employment attorney, and so those laws will not necessarily be same state to state. But you mentioned the EEOC, which is the federal employment law governance body, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Not everything that somebody does or aligns with is going to be considered a protected class, such that they are permitted or they should not be prohibited from employment based upon that. So alignment, for example, with a hate group or a group that is ideologically discordant or repugnant to our values is not necessarily prohibited by the EEOC, because that is not a protected class. To have an ideological stance in that regard is not protected. A religious stance could be, but again, that's going to be dictated by what federal law considers a religion. So there will be different bits and pieces there to consider. But again, not everything that somebody says that they are or want to be or align with is going to be protected in the sense that we have to still give them a job, even if we do not agree with that. And certainly in line with, a position where they would say, I'm, part of a Nazi party or something really repugnant like that. We don't have to say as employers that is acceptable. There will be messiness with those lines, though. I will tell you that in my experience, there are a lot of intricacies in the law that are not necessarily apparent. For example, the manner in which someone wears their hair could, in fact, be something that is, religious in nature, or could be part of a disability. We don't know necessarily what those things are, and it's not always appropriate to ask. And I think the best thing that one can do in the hiring process is to see if, again, somebody is culturally aligned, someone has the qualifications. But if there are concerns, then, I hate to give more money to lawyers like me, but I think that's the time where we start to talk to attorneys who might be able to say, okay, here's the actual line that we can't cross, and here's the lines that we can totally blow over because they're not protected. Because you do need to also protect the organization, right? That's really important. We can't simply defect from our values because we're so worried about offending someone or so worried about running afoul of the law. For the most part, your own sense of what is right and wrong is going to be a super helpful guide. You're all incredibly intelligent people. So when you feel like you're maybe butting against somebody who isn't going to be a good fit based on their values or perspectives, that's probably a good signal that that's not a good fit straight off the bat. If it goes further than that and you think maybe I'm abridging somebody's rights, then I'm a phone call away. I can certainly guide you with that. That would be my pleasure, because it is tricky. I won't lie. It's very tricky. And it's, one of those things where you can try your hardest, your best, be wonderful, work with integrity, and still have a complaint filed against you, right? Things can happen. It doesn't mean the complaint's going to go anywhere. Doesn't mean that it's valid, that it bears merit, but anyone can file anything at any time. So we just have to kind of move with our integrity, know that we're doing things in the right, know that we stand behind our decisions. And if that's the case, then let the chips fall where they may. But at the end of the day, the law doesn't support just any complaint or any cause of action that doesn't bear itself in the law itself. So I'm not worried about anyone here with any of those things, but nevertheless, as we move through this process, that's certainly something that I would be happy to offer and chat with you about at any point, because that's literally what I used to practice. And so it's, as much as I'd like it to not be buried in the back of my head, It really is. So,
Living
great
there
question.
rent-free.
Yeah, rent-free. Exactly.
Yeah,
Very much so.
There's two thoughts that occur to me, and then Justin. First is that it is really fun to be in the room with an employment lawyer and a union guy. So the former union guy and the former. So yeah, that's fun. One of the other things that I wanted to mention that we've done for ourselves at Creating the Future, everything we do has our value statement attached to it. When we sign a partnership agreement or a contract, it references our values and states out right outward. I'm in the middle right now of writing, I think, 3 different agreements, and they all state in like the first couple of paragraphs that our work will be guided by our values as attached as Exhibit A. When we have worked with others, when we were consulting 10, 15 years ago, and we were helping with hiring, I remember one case in particular where we were hiring a CEO for a fairly large organization, and the job announcement listed 2 things. It listed what the job was going to entail, and it listed the values. And it said that we are going to be hiring according to these values. And so we started with that. And I can't see us doing anything different, anything differently, that we start with, here's the values you will be expected to uphold. So it's not just a job description, but part of that job description is, here are the values that you will be expected to uphold. So I think it's that critical. And has been in all the work that we've done. Like I said, it's included in every one of our contracts in like the first 3 paragraphs. Justin.
Yeah, so one quick, just because I might have missed it because I got pulled away when folks were talking about those who were affected, and I just wanted to make sure that we were really explicit. Whomever is deciding to hire or contract. So like literally, who's the person or persons saying yes? So I don't know if we've gotten that specific, but no. that is I think that's a really important affected class that we think about here. And I think following up on both Shantine, what you were saying, and Hildy, what you were saying around those values, I think, and this is a little bit of sort of the what it would take component too, because it's always messy, these 2 components, but the recognition that the values stand independent of the people, that the values are clearly an articulation of what's being held culturally by the organization. It's not do you believe, and I think Hildy, you mentioned this, but can you behave in this way? So it doesn't really matter your belief or who you are. The question is, it's a performance question, really. Like, can you do Excel? Yes or no? Can you treat people with respect in the way that we've defined it? Do you, are you going to be able to engage in, what are, equitable practices? And even though there's a subjectivity to this, it's really important that we objectify that subjectivity, like that we're very clear, like this value in action looks this way, and we are, the expectation is that's a performance benchmark for you. You take that on, you adopt that, you are a representative of that. And so I think as we think about that, because that's also the onus on those who are in board or trustee or steward roles, as well as anyone who has, personal interactions with folks and people who have any decision-making authority over resources and assets that are being used to make those decisions in alignment with that. So having that body, that artifact within the organization, which we do have those values statements and those values and actions, but really, I think to Shantine's point is how I understood it is, we frame that very clearly as like, it's not even a belief system, it's a performance system that's there. So
yeah, Yeah, and the fact that this board's entire job is around integrity to our values. So yeah. Kara, did you have something?
I really don't know if this is a relevant point or not. I would just say for me, like employment and like when on the end of being the employee or contractor in something, it's often been fraught with a fair amount of pain, because somebody else has like authority or control over these things. And I realize that because of all that history, right, which is probably like the way many folks have inhabited being an employee, that's like what we bring to a situation. Like I bring like maybe just like in the back of my mind a defensiveness, or what does this really mean, or what do they want to see? And just like I think that point of like it's not about values, it's about like behavior and can you show this is really important. And I feel like I'm in my 40s and like just like at a fairly novice level of how do I bring that kind of presence to my employee, like to my employer and to that relationship. I feel like I know more how to bring it in personal relationships, but the employment one, yeah, it feels very different because of my history or whatever. And so just no matter how firm like how clear the organization understands how to act in these ways, it could be that for others, it's like, it's very novel because folks have maybe never had an employment relationship like that.
Dimitri and I were reminiscing this past weekend, and I don't remember what the trigger was for the reminiscing, but we were reminded that decades ago, we had an intern in our office. This was when we were still consulting and still running the diaper bank. So this is easily 20, 25 years ago. We had an intern in our office. He was with us for a year, one of the most delightful young guys. And when he graduated, we took him out for lunch and said, so Adam, what are you thinking about? What are you thinking about that you want to do now that you're out of school? And the name of our consulting company was Resolve at the time. And he said, well, I think I want to find a place to work like Resolve. And Dimitri and I looked at each other and went, oh, honey, we're really sorry. We have spoiled the crap out of you. And you're just coming out of college and you think this is what life is like. And we're really sorry. We've done a horrible thing because this is going to be your expectation. And that's really what I'm thinking about, Kara, is that it's just such an unusual thing to be in a place where it is nurturing. Most people are bringing the trauma of 3 different traumas in 3 different employment settings with them. But yeah, you're just reminding me of poor Adam, just going, oh, hon, we're real sorry. One of the things that's occurring to me, and I'm curious what you all are experiencing this or your observations about it. One of the things that I think is going to be interesting as we start down this path is everybody in the nonprofit world is currently talking about the workforce crisis. It's every other headline in the Chronicle of Philanthropy. Somebody was asking me the other day if we would do a webinar about catalytic thinking and apply it to workforce scarcity in the nonprofit sector. And there's all kinds of articles that are analyzing what do we think it's about and blah, blah, blah. Is this post-COVID? Is this Gen Z? Is this, go down the list? I know that there are workforce shortages everywhere. There's 2 restaurants I can think of in town that are really popular restaurants that are only open from Wednesday through Saturday because they can't find staff. So I'm curious what you all are thinking about in terms of workforce scarcity, which plays right into whatever our hiring is and whatever our employment practices is.
Yeah, if I could just jump in here on what my observations have been in my space, there has been a rise of a belief, and I think it's very well warranted in most cases, that from the employee perspective, if I'm an employee, I haven't been treated well by other employers. I can see they don't have loyalty to me. I know that if I call out sick because I have a health issue or my kid is sick or whatever it happens to be, their message back to me is going to be, well, find someone to cover you. Or if you can't be in today, forget about it, you're out. And so the perspective is that employers don't give you their loyalty. Therefore, why should I provide my loyalty to my employer? It's just a job, right? It's just a paycheck. I go in, I get out, and that's all that can be expected of me and all that I should aspire to. And again, I think that there's a lot of trauma built in that is well warranted, but part of what we can be mindful of is this concept of loyalty. And it doesn't mean that they have to unduly sacrifice their time for the company or that you will unduly sacrifice the organization's values or integrity for on behalf of the employee. But it does mean that oftentimes there's a huge misalignment between what's being expected of by the employer and what is anticipated from the employee. And when those two things are not in conjunction, that's when we really start to have these really time consuming employment problems. And it's also why people don't want to be a part of a workforce where they're going to be paid a certain amount of money and asked to be to uphold values, right? To also be a part of a solution that is greater than what the nitty gritty of the office work is day to day. And so I think this also goes back to this question of culture, right? And finding those people who see that they need to behave in that way that upholds the integrity, but we also have to make a promise to them at the outset that we're going to do our very best as employers in the broad sense to offer them considerations for when they do need us to be there for them. And that has always been, in my experience, the way that I see, employees staying on board for a long time. We get far less turnover when the employees feel like the employer is there for them. But that gap is just widening, and it has been widening since COVID. And I think that's a huge part of the employment crisis, but also especially in the nonprofit space, where we're asking people to not only be part of the work, but part of the values, the mission, bear that in their heart and soul as they proceed day to day. It's a big ask. And there are definitely people out there who want to do it, but finding those people and then giving them the encouragement that they're at the right space is a challenge. And I think it's very doable. It's just what I've seen though.
Yeah, I'm reflecting on some of the notes in the chat that unfortunately, if you're watching on the screen, you can't see, but we'll post the chat later. That both Rihanna and Justin have been talking about the extractive nature of employment in a capitalist society. The fact that Rihanna was mentioning that we're always asked to, quote, leave our baggage at the door. Which so far I've been at this for many, many decades, and I can't tell you how you leave your baggage at the door because your baggage is who you are. And so are we inviting the whole person into the room, which is part of the extractive nature of, no, please leave that person out. We just need this piece of it and we want to take it out of you. Yeah. Carl and then Rihanna.
I sort of my thinking about this is that I think COVID accelerated some things that were already happening. So I don't think it's COVID specifically that has changed things. So I think we've got to ask ourselves what's been going on sort of longer term in the sector. I mean, a theory for me would be that 20 years ago, whatever, well, a bit more than that now, when I first started working in the sector, there was something different about being employed in our sector to being employed in the private sector. The psychological contract was different, I think, and even though we arguably, well, we did pay less than the private sector, there were things that we did in terms of flexibility. So, for example, there's a high proportion of female employment in the sector, so we were very good for working mums and so on. Like things like in the UK, we had things like term time contracts. So if you had school kids, you only had to work during the school term and you could take the holidays off and other sort of variances to flexible working, and we were seen as the gold standard there. And it sort of strikes me that in this sort of competition for employees that we've seen over the last sort of 20, 30 years, I think the private sector has not only caught up, I actually think the private sector is better at than we are sometimes in some of these issues. And this may be controversial, but I don't think we're as good as we think we are. I think we have a vision of ourselves about how wonderful we are in the sector, that the reality doesn't bear that. And I hate saying this, but actually we're not very good employers sometimes, whether it's about this dissonance between values and actions that we've sort of talked about before, or just that like we're just not very good as in amateurish as employers sometimes. And we have to face up to some of those difficult things, it seems to me. And I mean, if you're in a tight labour market, as we know all Western economies are at the minute for various reasons, if you're faced by, I mean, on the one hand, sort of an employer that pays less is expecting you to not only sort of turn up and do your work, but believe in the mission and like give your all for it and bring your whole self to work and all sort of those things. Versus on the other hand, I don't know if you sort of had these headlines in your country about some people that actually have got to the point where they were sort of quiet quitters. They want to turn up, they want to do a 9 to 5 job, and then after 5 o'clock, they don't want to hear from you. They don't want to be contacted by phone or whatever, or expected to be always on. So I think we need to think about what people want from work and about how psychological contracts have changed.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah. Rihanna.
I don't think I'll be as eloquent as anyone else that has shared. But what I've been thinking is that I feel like there's maybe the nonprofit sector is having a little bit of an identity crisis. We describe ourselves as nonprofit. We don't have our own name for what we do. Recently in Canada, there was this report from some news agency. They looked at charities across the country and the salaries. And salary ranges have to be posted. And they started calling out some of the bigger charities for paying their CEOs, $200,000, $300,000. And it created this big ruckus on LinkedIn around why are you donating to charities that pay their CEOs so much money? But we don't ask these questions of for-profit companies. And a lot of these nonprofits were environmental organizations that are doing work no one else is doing. We can all kind of see the impact of climate change. So I feel like there's this fine balance between wanting to have people that are in the nonprofit sector that are really connected to the mission, vision, and values, but we don't want to pay them too much. They have to, give their souls to the work, and that's not flying anymore. People are exhausted, they're burnt out, they're leaving. I know here in Alberta, we have an association that supports all the women's shelters, and their turnover rate in all of the shelters across the province is like 40 or 50%. It's extremely high. So we have to start thinking differently about how we value the work in the sector, and that it's okay to pay CEOs that much money because they're doing a really important job, and that we all need to be paid more. So yeah, I think that's just kind of what I'm thinking about is how do we strike that balance between ensuring we have employees that are committed to the mission, vision, and values, but not so much so that they're going to give their soul to the work.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I think we have, as a sector globally, a remarkable opportunity in front of us right now to considerably change I can't think of any other word for it than bullshit of that we should be paid less. We're paid less because it's women's work, is why we're paid less. We're paid less because it's caring work. We are the moms of the world. We're taking care of hungry kids and homeless kids and kids who can't read. Oh, those kids happen to be adults. Oh yeah, but it's that whole women's work thing. And I think that I think the whole sector right now is at a thought junction. I've never seen so many groups dedicated to rethinking how we do things. Whether that is trust-based philanthropy or the fact that it is a common conversation in philanthropy now to be talking about equity and who do we give to and are we giving to minority-led organizations? What is our track record? We're actually hearing those conversations. I think we have a remarkable opportunity to say that changing the compensation structure in this sector is very, very, very easy. It is a lot easier than it is in the for-profit world. That's because in the for-profit world, they have to make the money to pay the employees. We have to raise the money. If funders decided that they would go from 5% of their distribution to 10% of their distribution, if funders would reject budgets that say, no, I'm sorry, you're not paying your employees enough, come back with a realistic employment amount, we could fix this in 2 minutes. And we're the sector that can do it. I'm so sorry, bandwagon, sorry. Justin, I will stop babbling.
Okay, I think what Carl was saying about the pandemic really sort of accelerating things, and I think this speaks to both the employment across all sectors. It used to be that there was the so-called leader gap, that all the baby boomers were going to leave and there weren't going to be any leaders. Apologies to all you baby boomers, you didn't leave. And I think what's happening is we've deconstructed the whole notion of sort of progressive employment, which is, you know what? Yeah, a 40-year-old doesn't want to be waiting tables. But we've hollowed out this middle component. We've gigafied so many things that this idea of, you know what? Yeah, when you're a teenager, kind of a crappy job is okay. Like, I mean, even if we were to say like, yeah, there's non-desirable work that always needs to be done. And, that's part of laboring and people should be compensated and all that. But the idea being that, while not at all equitable, we did used to have sort of this progressive model, which is, yeah, you would start bottom, you'd move up, when you felt compelled to be able to do more, there was an opportunity for you, and that is just non-existent. I mean, when you think about the Gen Z and the millennials, yeah, there is something valid to the notion that they're feeling like you're asking us to do stuff below us, given what we've where we are in life. And then they hear back, well, you haven't earned it. And it's like, it doesn't matter whether they've earned it. When you've had 30 years of life, just in general, there are ways you want to engage in life, and work is just life. And so I think that and the nonprofit sector, I think, is also an amplification of this, that we had the grayifying of the sector, of people just hanging on so long that there wasn't this opportunity for growth for folks. And that's certainly a retirement and economy issue that drove a lot of that, but also an ego issue, people holding on to wanting to continue to have things. So I think as that it's sometimes really easy to discount, like we don't pay enough, or we don't, and when we're really thinking about it, is what is it, like that was said, what's the relationship to work, what role does that play in people's lives, and is it meeting them in terms of what they need in their life at their whatever life stage they're at. And that's the thing that I feel like has really just fallen apart. And so you have all of these people who are lost in the middle. And to Carl's point of sort of, I hate the term quiet quitting. It's like, they're just actually doing the job. That's what they're doing. But, that idea of people saying, yeah, I'm only going to do this much because if you want more, I want more. And it's not money that they're necessarily saying, I want more. I mean, that's a part of it, but I'll stop there.
Yeah, and a big part of it is there's the quote, doing the job and that's it, if you want to call it quiet quitting or whatever we're going to call it, which is doing the job. there's also the issue of hiring in the first place, is will we have a pool of people to hire from? Which is another question that I know people are facing. Carl.
Yeah, Justin has just made me think that one of the things that I think is problem with the employment model that we've had is that I can remember running an organization where your workforce model was almost dependent upon the fact that people would never be sick and that they would all be in the top quartile of performers in terms of their performance. And almost that, I mean, if anyone was just like normal performance, as Justin is saying, just doing the job, the organization couldn't deliver because the whole thing was just built upon like this idea that like, we just have these exceptional people. But anyway, what Justin was making me think about, and coming back to your question, Hildy, about sort of like the employment crisis and so on is almost, I think, one of the things that we haven't discussed, and it's a problem not just in our sector but elsewhere, is you have this sort of tension between different generations who are all working in the same workplaces now, and those different generations have got different values and different worldviews about many things, but not the least of which is what social change looks like. So Justin, I mean, I think he's describing a world that I think I've seen, which is you have young people that want to take action and do things and might have a different perspective on what action should look like. That is, dare I say, more radical than people say of my generation. I mean, if Vu was here, I mean, Vu would probably sort of like see me as that, what does he call them, both siders, I think he calls them, that see sort of different perspectives. And I'm not saying he's wrong or right, but I'm just pointing out that young people, I think, are looking at the nonprofit sector and they're not seeing it as a place that delivers the sort of social change that they want to do. And I think they're looking at alternative ways to do things. So Diana Revive's sort of argument that the millennial generation, they were sector agnostic, they just wanted to change the world and it didn't matter which sector they worked in. Almost, I mean, that's gone even further, it seems to me, with sort of Gen Z, who look at our sector and don't see it as a place to change the world. And I think we have to deal with that.
Yeah, there's so much going on culturally and societally. Looking at now, it's not just one generation, but two generations, the millennials and especially Gen Z, where they'll never afford a house. They'll never buy a house. And generationally, I mean, there's the rare exceptions, but that they will not afford a house. Well, your thoughts about what we have done culturally, first of all, in terms of the cultural trope of that is the epitome of life, is you'll own your own house, which we can argue whether that's appropriate or not. But the thought that, okay, that is, quote, the norm that you are brought up with from the time you're this big, and you're told, yeah, no, not for you, and not for anybody your age, and not ever again, and don't even think about it. That changes how you're thinking about it. If what the reason I was working is because I was going to have, that was part of it, this whole meme. I think that we are, it could be COVID, it could be, I think you're right, Carl, that it was coming before COVID, but there are huge cultural shifts going on right now, just in terms of what people expect from their lives, and what role does work have in that, and what role will we have in that as we are hiring? Yeah, Shantine.
Thank you so much. So many good ideas here. One thing, there's two ideas I have as we're talking. One is the idea of titles and responsibilities. This is something that I see come up a lot, which is the misalignment between someone's title and what they're being asked to do. A lot of times it's very easy as an employer to literally just hand out titles. It doesn't have to be held so close to the chest that we're so afraid of making someone feel a little bit better by giving them a title that they feel really comfortable with, that does acknowledge the things that they do, but makes the job much more attractive. And so one of the discrepancies that I see in my practice a lot of the time is I am, assistant manager, but I feel like I'm doing a manager's job. well, what does that really mean? You know, is it just that you are doing more work than you think you should be doing? Are you doing the same work that the supervisor is doing, and therefore you think that there's a misalignment there? What is the nature of the misalignment? And on the employer side, wouldn't it be easier to correct those things to make people feel more acknowledged? I think that in my generation, the millennials, but Gen Z particularly, there's a desire to bear a title that maybe would be perceived by the elder generations, including millennials, as too high, too big for their britches, right? But at the same time, if we just acknowledge those things, it's not that meaningful internally, and from my perspective, of whatever someone's title is, as so long as it is motivating and attractive in a way that makes someone feel really acknowledged. That's my first thought on that. And my second thought is the idea of onboarding. A lot of times employers onboard by sending an offer letter, perhaps an employment agreement, many times not, and then maybe a week or a day or an hour of training, right? That's the onboarding perspective. And what I found to be a much more compelling, but also helpful way of actually determining someone's success as an employee is extending an onboarding period both before and after they actually sit at their desk. So the first thing we do is we send a letter that explains the values, that really embraces them and invites them, even makes them feel already part of the team. That's an easy thing to do. But then when we get to what does onboarding really mean? Are we giving them sufficient training? Are we telling them to expect training and then actually meeting that obligation? That's a major one. On the job training is really essential, but let's set those goals out and make it clear that that's going to happen for 3 months, whatever the period of time is that we want to do it. Another issue with onboarding is it's not necessarily always just a manager's job to onboard, but it could be colleagues. Colleagues can be invited into this process of helping onboard people, and it really helps employee satisfaction when you tell them, once you become more experienced in this role, we may ask you to mentor new employees. That is not to say you're going to take more work on. That's not to say that you're going to supplant the job with a manager or that you should be expected to do that. But really, this is about a team effort. You're the person in that position with the best expertise at that point to offer that type of mentorship. And it is something that we expect, because a lot of times you will find that employees are super disgruntled when they're continually asked to help play that role of mentorship, but that was never specified as something that they need to do. And I also think, going back to the sort of genesis of this conversation, that when you are a new employee, you want to feel embraced, but you want to feel supported and encouraged. And the best way to do that is to say that we have clear structures in place that are going to help you onboard, get up to speed, feel comfortable. You have the support of the team. They're not going to be reticent to help you. They're not going to feel put out to help you. That's what we're all here for. And those types of things are the sort of emotional needs of the younger generations that are not being met systematically and that are causing such discordance at the outset. I mean, immediately the first week, if you're told you're going to have a week of training and you get 1 hour and it's just on anti-harassment in the workplace, that's not going to be sufficient. That's not training. You know, I mean, you do need to know that, but let's make it holistic. What are your job responsibilities? How do you do it? So it's really about having those structures in place. I see a note about unpaid mentorship. Yes, we're not asking for unpaid mentorship. It's just a matter of building those structures in so that your employees who will be there to help others in the office don't feel like they're being expected to do something that their manager should be doing, and making them very disgruntled in the process. So
yeah. Oh boy, does that, I mean, we could have this conversation for the next 3 hours, which is so frequently the way it goes. If you were looking for a job, and maybe if you weren't even looking, but something came along that you went, okay, that's too interesting for me not to apply. What would it look like that would call to you? What would call to you as someone who may or may not be looking, We actually once, years and years ago, Dimitri and I had somebody come out of retirement because the ad they saw in the paper was so interesting. What would call to you in terms of yeah, okay, I want to play.
I'm just wondering, I think that's a good question, but I've also been thinking about, as I've been listening, I feel like we need to kind of blow up the whole, nonprofit model about how we think about the structure entirely, right? The role of the executive director and vis-a-vis the board, vis-a-vis the staff, everything. So I mean, I'm wondering if we need to ask a bigger question first about like, what does it make, possible to have a structure or an organizational structure that would bring out the best in people. And if we figure that out, then people will flock to want to work. So we don't need to worry, I mean, about becoming attractive and having limited, potential people that are interested in the job. Sorry to derail that a little bit.
Oh, no, that you know what the next question is going to be. So it's, and we'll save that one for next time, but you know what the next question is going to be. Yeah. The what would good look like question. But yeah. I mean, there's so many, both small ideas and large, the big question is what does it look like when you have a system that brings out the best in the people, and how does that start with a hiring process? That'll be next time. Tune in next time, kids. But what would call to you? I mean, certainly you can get a sense. What would you say? Well, no, I don't even want to dive into it yet. What would call to you? What would you look for? I will give you the mic.
Control that I have some agency in this job, whatever it is, that it's either helping decide what is done, helping determine why we do it or how we do it or whatever, having an influence on that. I mean, that would be something that would be appealing. Before I jump off, one of the other things that has been going through my mind is the societal shift that's taking place because of things that are not related to people, in the sense of people aren't doing them. All of the technology things that are going on, the robots that are replacing people, the AI that is replacing jobs and tasks, the private equity firms that don't care. You lost your house, no problem. We were able to resell it for twice the amount, we had sold it to you in the first place. All of this is converging all at the same time. Add COVID to the mix, add generations to the mix, and to me, it's just perfectly obvious why everything is happening right now. And that this is a great opportunity for nonprofits. And nonprofits is the wrong word. It's great opportunities for social good organizations because they deal with people directly and they are really working on what's good for people, not what's good for the profit or the efficiency or the whatever. So
Yeah, absolutely. What else? What would you be looking for? Mark, if you saw an ad that said you're not the boss of me.
Yeah, I'm a damaged corporatocracy victim, and it's too bad that the younger people listen to me all these years, that the corporations are not as loyal to you as you are to them, and we were all right. And one of the things that I've been applying all of this to is putting teams together for different functions. I brought a group of people together that were architect, engineer, and designers to blitz out whatever they thought, for a 2,000-acre parcel that we just retrieved from a bad sale in town. It's our property. It was a gift from the Navy. And when you get groups like that together, you can lead them. I'm not an architect, but I can certainly lead the discussion so that everybody's got a seat at the table and they got the same chair. And this has a lot to do with the cooperative models that freak people out. It's like, well, they're not the boss. Who's the boss? Well, nobody's the boss. You have respect for your part in this. We've got a woman that knows process and policy really well. We've got another guy that was a union head who knows how to manage conflict within the group and within the other groups that we're bringing in. I don't know what I'm doing there, but then we got somebody else who's involved with the civics. So they're into being the conduit of information between the population and government and back again. And there's nobody in charge here. And that's a very, very scary thing for a lot of people. But the other part of this is, and based on what we've worked with, and I know Carl and Hildy and Angie and others, we talked about maybe even 2 years ago, is the idea that I need to be training people my job so that I can do my job better and then move into, not up into, but over into something else. So that the cooperative effort it's symbiotic. There's a term out there and I forgot it. Biosynergistic. The idea that it is a organism, that it's an organization of different parts that without my lungs, I'm not going to make it. So, right. So that's, like I said, it's a scary thing for a lot of people. We hired somebody into this nonprofit and they said, well, tell me what to do. I said, Ann, I didn't bring you here to tell you what to do. Well, she says, you're the president. I said, yeah, right. That's not my function, is to tell you what to do. We brought you in because you've got a talent set and an experience range that is far beyond anything that I can tell you what to do. So bringing these people into meetings, like, what are you working on? What is fulfilling you? What is making you do your job to your best? So there you go.
Yeah, well, I love the ecosystem approach that you bring to everything, because there is nobody in charge in an ecosystem. And that's really what you're talking about. There's somebody years ago was in one of our classes. She jumped up with this look on her face, and she said, "What if my job is to take care of you and your job is to take care of me?" And that really, really stuck with me. There's really good examples of that. One of my favorite examples actually comes out of the most for-profit of for-profit entities, which is a financial management firm. And these were it was founded 20, 30 years ago by two very traditional, I shouldn't say very traditional, they were two stockbroker financial kinds of people who were in a very traditional setting. And what they realized in that setting was that because bonuses were based on individual performance, nobody had complete information, because if I gave you information, you would do better than me. And therefore your clients, while your clients would do better, company didn't care about the clients. What they cared about is who's bringing in the most money. And so when they formed their firm, their approach, they now do, and like I said, they've been around for 20, 30 years. Their approach to evaluations and bonuses is your bonus is based entirely on one question in a 360-degree review. And that question is, let's say it's Joe, did Joe make you better at your job? Did Joe help you be better at your job? And so it's not just nonprofit. It is where the values are guiding everything. I was so blown away when I heard that. They said, that's what's going to be best for the client. And if it's best for the client, we will make enough money. And I just thought it really gets to what you're talking about, Mark, which is that whole ecosystem approach of the tree doesn't yell at the mushrooms that it's taken up. No, everybody works together and there's nobody in charge. I really, really appreciate that. I hate to say this, we are 10 minutes from the end, almost 15 minutes from the end of our conversation. This has been exhilarating, as it always is, and my brain's exploding. I know that I'm going to re-listen to this and take very slow time to stop the recording at each point and go, oh, okay, let myself think about it. And as I said, next time we'll be diving into the next question in catalytic thinking is, okay, we've really gotten a handle on so much of what's going on in workplaces in general. What would good look like? What would good look like for employment practices and specifically for hiring practices? But you can't do one without the other. It's all so interrelated. Speaking of ecosystem. So let's take a deep breath in and out. Had somebody in one of our, you guys that have been around me long enough know that I'm always reminding us that we breathe in a lot and we don't breathe out a lot. Somebody in our community of practice said something that I just thought was brilliant. She said that she was taking a class that included breathing, and that what this person said is when we're told to take a deep breath, we usually breathe in. And that a breath in like that is the breath of being startled. That when you're startled, you breathe in. She said, but when you breathe out like a warm bath, that when you get into a warm bath, you go, ah, and that's the relaxing breath. And I thought that was brilliant, brilliant. And actually, for many of you who know Jackie and are not going to be surprised that it was brilliant, it was Jackie who was sharing this with us. And she said, so now whenever she's thinking about it, she's going, warm breath, warm breath, warm bath, warm bath. Ah. So let's take a breath and take a moment for reflection. What is, if you took any notes, if you want to circle anything that stood out for you today, what is standing out to you from our conversation today?
Could I begin, please?
Please.
What stands out from the conversation from me today is that we've had a good sort of almost first principles route around an issue that has very practical significance. And to me, this is like when we're at our best. And Angie, you might feel the same about academia, right? I feel academia as its best when you're providing that intellectual framework for discussing an issue that is really actually practically important that people can do something with. So this has been one of the Creating the Future sessions that I've really enjoyed listening to and participating in.
Wonderful. I'm so glad you were here. Who else? What's standing out to you all?
I'll just jump on with Carl. I agree. And then I also, at the same time, I'm ready to, get to the next step instead of focusing on all the problems, right, that exist, but figure out the next steps is what I'm anxious to get to. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate all the conversation.
Yeah. Well, what will happen out of this conversation is really looking at everything that we talked about through the lens of catalytic listening. What's strong, what's working, what's possible. And very specific to the questions that we were asking is what is important? What are the values that are important? And what values pop up out of this conversation? Because it's really what we were talking about is what's important to all of us. What are the values? Kara.
I think at one point, it might have been you, Hildy, but you said the phrase like, it's unusual to be in a place that's nurturing. And I feel like that sums up kind of some of the tensions that we were talking about. And I'm just carrying that as far as, okay, how do we call out that unusualness? How do we inhabit it? How do we, in practical ways, try to like navigate it and make it like more usual for all of us in the kind of hiring discussion and dynamic.
Oh, yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Shantine, what's standing out to you?
First of all, you are all brilliant, and I've so enjoyed this conversation. And I think part of what I've so enjoyed about this conversation, beyond the thoughtfulness and the ideas, is that it's happening. I think some of us might take it for granted because we are in spaces where we value people and we value their experience and we value their values, that these types of things might happen a lot. And I can tell you from the employment space, the legal space where I'm in, if companies and organizations sat down to do this before they started hiring, or even just intervene to start hiring and onboarding and creating their organizational culture, there would be, I mean, people would be so much happier en masse. And I think that that's really what's beautiful about this, is that it's so necessary, yet so infrequent. And the work that's being done here is a model of what could be done on a much more widespread scale that would make employers and employees so much happier and really want to work again. Going back to that idea of quiet quitting or just doing the job, right? It's if these processes were in place everywhere that I've worked or everywhere that I've represented, I can tell you they probably wouldn't need my legal services. They probably wouldn't need HR intervention in the way that they do, because this is really incredible. And I really just want to shout out Hildy and Dimitri and all of you for doing this, because it's so mindful, so thoughtful, and so necessary. So just really honored to be part of this conversation and working on this in the future with you all. So thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Who else? What's standing out to you from our conversation today?
I'll chime in. This is my warm and fuzzy when we get to ground these really tactical things and structural things and values. So I think just I don't think we've necessarily said it explicitly, but all of this points to the fact that people's humanity is honored. Like this, the employment is such a deeply, I mean, it only happens because of people. And it's like, it is actually the one legal place where we contractually define the relationship. And so to think about that as really grounded in people feeling that their humanity is being honored, I think is, it's just nice to hear and nice to be a part of.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for being explicit about that. It is exactly what it is. Mark, how about you? What's standing out to you today?
I shocked myself and asked a question in a very large, important meeting last week, and somebody wanted to put it. The shock was that I've absorbed at least one thing that I've learned from you, Hildy, and everybody over the last 4 years. Slow learner. One of the things that came up was that somebody came in with a lot of money and they wanted to build a performing arts center on this big property. So somebody else said, well, they get into the how right away. And they said, well, what's that going to do to the ballet classes downtown? I said, well, probably put them out of business. And that's not what we're trying to do, is it? And the question that just came right out of me, and it's a kind of an adjustment of what we ask. What we ask is, who would this decision impact? I've been asking the question, who would be most adversely impacted by this decision? And then get them into the room. And I turned it around right away and said, what do the ballet company, the East End Arts Council, and the Suffolk Theater need from us? Then you can go ahead and put your performing arts center in. So this is the framing that we're starting to work with, and it works. I'll be very excited to tell you the results in a couple of weeks. But thank you for making this happen.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Rihanna, how about you? What's standing out to you?
A lot. I took a lot of notes. I think it's really interesting that everyone's kind of having these conversations in different spaces across Pearl Island and the UK. And here are some things that we're thinking about. Like we have our AGM coming up, so we're thinking about recruiting new board members, and we're also thinking about how to get more new grads from post-secondary into the nonprofit sector. So this conversation about values with different generations is like we've been having this conversation a bit internally. I think it was really helpful to think through some of that today, and I can see how easily it can apply in different settings. So I think
Awesome. Wonderful. How about you, Dimitri?
One word, optimism. This session makes me feel very optimistic about what's possible. And we discussed a lot of things that are obstacles and are warning signs and are negatives and, fill in the blank. And this to me is an opportunity to look at things from a very different lens that is humane, positive, and potentially revolutionary for this movement. I want to say sector, but it's really a movement of people.
Yeah. I've got several big things. Obviously, the values piece is the most important. The values, especially being as for creating the future where, one of our 3 core tenets, it's always about the people. It's always about the people. It's never about the thing. And so much of standard hiring practices is about the thing and not the people. And so much of HR is about the thing, maybe entirely. The only time that HR is about the people is because we know you're going to mess up. So we're going to make rules about when you're going to mess up. Which gets to your optimism, Dimitri, of what if, and what Andrew was saying, what if we set practices to bring out the best in people, then we don't need most of what HR does. So that whole piece about it being about the people, and I'm really, my brain is really wrapped around the whole ecosystem piece, Mark. That really, I know I'm going to be thinking about that a lot. So thank you for that. And we will be getting together again the second Monday in March, the 11th, at 10 a.m. Pacific time, at 1 p.m. Eastern time, if things haven't changed in terms of daylight savings time yet, 6 p.m. UK time, and probably 2 in the morning Australia time, which I always lament that we can't really have people from down under. We actually had in one of our webinars, I have to say, somebody who got up at 2 o'clock in the morning to attend the webinar and it better have been a good webinar. But I'm really deeply, deeply grateful to you all. This has been a really, really wonderful conversation. I can't wait to dive into the next one. And I hope you will all be there because this has been very, very cool. So thank you all. And we will see you next time. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Good to see you.